a little over 3 years now, and in that first year, we managed to receive funding from 3 out of the 4 largest foundations in Oregon, and I really think that that speaks to the need for something like what we're doing here in Oregon. Um, why we exist, it's pretty clear. It's already been stated by the last couple of presenters, but and these stats are actually, we just got our new SAMHSA report, so I'll alter those. Oregon actually ranks 47th in access to treatment. However, our access didn't get any better. It's just some states got worse. Um, we currently have the 3rd highest untreated addiction rate in the country, okay? And 5 Oregonians die a day from alcohol-related deaths, whereas 1 to 2 Oregonians die daily from drug overdoses. I just want to point that out again. 5 times as many people die from alcohol in the state of Oregon as all drug overdoses combined, okay? And that is not to diminish drug overdoses by any stretch of the imagination. I am in recovery from heroin, and I lost a lot of friends to this disease. However, we need to start thinking about this issue as Oregon has an addiction crisis, not an opioid crisis, not a methamphetamine crisis, an addiction crisis. And until we start to look at the underlying impacts and the societal drivers that are causing this, we're not really going to get anywhere. It's just going to replace one to another. And April even pointed out, we're kind of seeing the beginning wave of a methamphetamine crisis here in Oregon. So, oh, also, real quick, over 2,100 Oregonians are going to die this year from drugs and alcohol. And not to diminish the AIDS epidemic, but at the height of the AIDS epidemic, 360 some odd people died. So that's a 700% increase. Just to put this crisis, this emergency, into perspective for folks. Like we have never really addressed this crisis at the level that we need to, or recognize how severe it is. So Oregon Recovers, from the beginning, we opted to try and reduce Oregon's addiction rate and increase our recovery rate. And we've actually worked with Oregon Health Authority to establish we're the first state in the country to establish a statewide recovery rate, so we can start to measure success there. And we pushed for the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission, which is a statewide governor-appointed commission that's been tasked with coming up with a statewide strategic plan to address addiction. They've adopted these 2 objectives. And anybody who's familiar with government, for that level of accountability to be adopted by a statewide agency dealing with addiction was really encouraging. Here's just some of the highlights of what we've done in the 3 years we've been around. And again, I just want to kind of point out, the reason we exist is in Oregon, there's never been an organized political constituency of the recovery community that drives policy change. There's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, a lot of folks participate in 12-step programs, which are, by design anonymous, which makes it inherently challenging to organize those people. And, there's a few trade organizations and things representing different treatment providers, but no overall statewide political constituency, and we're really trying to change that. So one of the first things we did in 2018 is we got the governor to declare addiction a public health crisis in Oregon. And we had a House bill passed, House Bill 4137, which set a series of deadlines for the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission to actually get moving on a plan and get this together. It also provided them with $250,000 to come up with a plan. We had the executive director, a new ED put in there. And then in the last legislative session, we passed another House bill that further strengthened the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission by bringing in non-voting member, a representative from the CCO, as well as legislative representation to just continue to build this coalition of folks that are actively engaged in coming up with this planning process. We also, more recently in September, which is National Recovery Month for anybody who doesn't know that, we had a series of city and county resolutions around the state passed by local advocates. So we weren't picking up the phone and calling county commissioners. Our local folks in each of these counties and cities worked, with their local elected officials to get resolutions passed at the city and county level declaring addiction a public health crisis in their community and asking their state legislators to do something about it. So it's that kind of grassroots organizing work throughout the state that we've really been focused on. event-wise, one of the most important things, but to my point of like, kind of a fundamental lack of organization around this issue is we need to build out that community, bring people together from different pathways to recovery. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with 12-step programs, but we have a lot of other pathways to recovery that are often not really highlighted. Things like refuge recovery, well-briety within the Native American community, smart recovery, and so on and so forth. So like a lot of our work has been creating events that are all inclusive, that celebrate people's recovery and bring people from every different corner of the recovery community together and kind of break those silos down so that we can kind of unify around our common goal of increasing recovery and reducing addiction in Oregon. So those are the 4 Walk for Recovery events we did in September this year. The previous September, we had one in Portland where I think like 900 people turned out in downtown Portland and walked through, downtown streets on a Saturday afternoon to celebrate recovery. This year, we organized 4 around the state in the 4 largest media markets. These were strategically planned to align with those resolutions passing the previous week. So we managed to generate like 30 news stories around the state covering this. And as I'm sure you're all aware, like if you want to see movement with elected officials, particularly at the state level, get it in the media, get press attention to this issue and keep it going. And so a lot of the community organizing and community building events we do are very, very focused on, identifying the audience we're trying to speak to and generating a lot of media buzz. I already covered the movement building stuff. That would be the resolutions. But yeah, in addition to educating our local elected officials, those resolutions had the other really cool effect of we're training advocates. We're building advocacy leadership in each of these regions around the state. These are folks just like me who come from a criminal justice background, like, have a criminal history, are in relatively early recovery, probably never had any good experiences in any kind of government building. And now they're going into City Hall, they're developing relationships with their local elected officials. They're learning to use their voice to empower themselves in their community. And that is personally extremely rewarding to see, but it also, that means that, when these county and city officials move on up into the state legislature in a few years, we will have those relationships. We're building sustained advocacy capacity across the state. So why am I here today? Other than the fact that I work at Oregon Recovers, I just celebrated 3 years last November in recovery. Thank you. I was an IV heroin and methamphetamine addict. And by the way, I use the word addict and addiction because I work in advocacy. So I'm trying to get people moving. I'm trying to incite a response. I want to see people's visceral response to get angry, to get vocal about this issue. And SUD doesn't really have the same, phonetic drive as the word addiction. But, I stole cars. I lived on Skid Row in Los Angeles. I did whatever I had to do to survive in that lifestyle for many years, and I survived a number of overdoses. I will tell you straight up, if it wasn't for people accessing naloxone through harm reduction services like syringe exchanges in Los Angeles, I would be dead right now. So first of all, I want to thank you guys for being here today. And if you didn't get your naloxone kit yet, make sure you do before you leave, because you never know who or when that's going to be needed. There were a number of cases where, in one situation, I keeled over on the sidewalk, right? And if somebody with naloxone had been passing by, they wouldn't have had to call the paramedics, and I would not have been footed with that massive medical bill. Ultimately, I do the work I'm doing. I had access to a lot of resources. I'm very fortunate in the sense that I had a family that was willing to help me get into treatment several times. And I really want to just really drive home the point that relapse is part of recovery, okay? To expect perfection after a 30-day spin dry cycle of residential treatment is something that we would not expect of any other chronic disease, all right? And the more understanding and compassionate of approach we can bring to the table when dealing with people with substance use disorder, the more likely they are to succeed. So just know that, it took me 6 years of in and out of treatment, and I don't even know, maybe 7 different treatment goes, multiple detoxes before I was really able to access recovery. That's not by any stretch of the imagination like the median or the standard. That's just my story. But I don't know very many people that got into recovery the first time they ever tried, right? Like it is a chronic relapsing disease, and we need to understand that and respect that and help people meet them where they're at, right? I'm a huge advocate for harm reduction services and practicing harm reduction principles in all, different pillars of a real continuum of care. And when I say continuum of care, what I'm talking about is prevention, like a robust, well-funded prevention system. A new intervention and engagement paradigm that is not centered in our criminal justice system, but is centered in our primary care system so that we can reach people and engage them before they end up in the criminal justice system. Treatment on demand and recovery support services. So the other really important thing to know here, we've already learned about prevention, we've learned about treatment. Recovery is really where the work starts, right? Like this is a chronic disease and you have to deal with this in a chronic way. You can't leave treatment and expect that you're somehow cured because you're not. The most important thing I did for my recovery in my life was when I got out of treatment, I immediately immersed myself in a recovery community and I stayed there and I'm still there today. It is, for me today, that means I go to, one meeting a week, but I'm actively sponsoring multiple people. I work obviously in recovery, so I'm surrounded by people in recovery. But, it is the most important part of my life, and I have to continue to believe that it is if I'm going to stay sober and clean. So in order to build a real comprehensive continuum of care in Oregon, and I'm just going to go out there and say this, we need revenue. So, if you're talking to folks, start talking about how we as a state can really craft policy that's going to be able to change the system. It needs to be dedicated revenue. We can't fund a real continuum of care if it's incremental amounts from the general fund in each governor's budget cycle. Like that's not going to fly. We need to go after where the real money is. So just food for thought here, a price increase on the lowest beer tax in the country could effectively fund a real continuum of care, and we could see really effective, increase in services here in Oregon and save a lot of lives. I think that's it. Oh yeah, recovery support centers. I just threw these four up there really quickly, but I'd be happy to talk to you guys afterwards. If there's other recovery support centers, if you live in some other area, and I'd be happy to connect you with people. Yes. I drunk driving. Yeah, it included both. Both. Yes, yes, it does. And that's why I said as a result of drugs and alcohol, not untreated addiction specifically, because you don't need to be diagnosed with an SED to kill somebody with your car if you're drunk or high, right? Like that that happens either way. So again, recovery support centers, and we are super fortunate here in this part of Oregon. We have access to a lot of really great places. The Alano Club and Fourth Dimension would be two that I'm very familiar with. Fourth Dimension Recovery Center is youth focused, so it's folks like 18 to 30 or thereabout. And that's one of the biggest challenges for young people trying to access recovery is going to a church basement AA meeting where you're like the youngest person by 30 years does not make recovery appealing, right? Like they're very, very tied to their social network. And having a place like Fourth Dimension where they offer not only peer services, but a variety of meetings. They also offer a lot of events. They do a lot of things together. They're very engaged in the community. That provides that added social network that's really important to younger folks. The Alana Club of Portland also has been pioneering a lot of really cool new programs. Both do a lot of peer services, but the Alana Club also does expungement clinics to help people remove some of the felonies. They work with the Multnomah County Public Defender's Office to remove felonies from folks' records so they can better access employment. They have a CrossFit gym that's free to anybody who's in recovery. Like people are starting to recognize that recovery and recovery support services means more than just going to an AA meeting, right? It means creating that social network for you, that support network. It means addressing other inequities within your behavior or lifestyle, like becoming healthier, quitting smoking, like I did. Like all of those things are huge to my recovery, and they're all very important. Eating healthier, hiking, whatever it might be. So, yeah, I think it was probably a little quick there, but does anybody have any questions? Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. I want another big hand for all our speakers today. April, Lily, Abby, everybody that was here, Mitch. Thank you guys for coming. Like I said before, I work for Clackamas Fire, and within Clackamas Fire, we have a community paramedic program. Part of that community paramedic program has some focus areas, and one of our focus areas happens to be on substance use disorder. I met up with April Heron about a year and a half ago, I guess 2 years ago now, and we started up Project Hope, and it's provides supports for people in recovery. And that's where I learned about harm reduction and became much more familiar and much bigger advocate for harm reduction. So like I said before, I want to thank all of you guys for being here, for being willing to take on naloxone, learn about it, have it, administer it, and all those things. Because of all the quotes I've told you today, the one that has had the most profound effect on me and the work that I do is when I heard someone say, where there's breath, there's hope. Thank you very much for coming.
You're watching Clacko TV. watching Clacko TV.
My name is Captain Petty. I'm the 15 Transportation Company Commander, and what I have behind me are the first 3 out of eventually 30 that we'll be receiving, so we can start testing these at the platoon level.